There's a type of person who hears, "I got 9 hours last night," and says it like a confession, like they're bracing for judgment. Meanwhile, everyone around them is bragging about running on 4 hours and 3 espressos like it's a badge of honor. And here's what nobody tells you. The people who genuinely love sleep, who protect it, who plan their whole day around it, they're not lazy, they're not unmotivated. According to sleep science, their brains might actually be doing something the rest of us have forgotten how to do. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at the early-to-bed person in your life completely differently. Let's start with the obvious question. Why does loving sleep carry so much shame? We live in a culture that treats exhaustion like proof of worth. Somewhere along the way, tiredness became a personality trait we're supposed to perform. I'm so busy. I barely slept. I'll sleep when I'm dead. It's practically a competition. And in that competition, the person who says, "Actually, I went to bed at 9 and I feel amazing," gets treated like they've somehow failed at being a productive human being. But here's where it gets interesting. Neuroscience says that's completely backwards. People who prioritize and genuinely enjoy sleep often have what researchers call a highly responsive circadian system. Their internal clock isn't just present, it's loud. It sends clear, strong signals about when the body needs to shut down and repair. And instead of overriding those signals with caffeine and willpower like the rest of us, their brains actually listen. A study out of the Sleep Research Society found that people who report high sleep satisfaction show significantly stronger alignment between their melatonin release and their actual bedtime behavior. Translation: their body says it's time and they don't argue with it. And that's not weakness. That's an incredibly efficient nervous system. Because here's what's actually happening during deep sleep. Your glymphatic system, think of it as your brain's cleaning crew, activates almost exclusively during deep, uninterrupted sleep. It flushes out metabolic waste that builds up during your waking hours, including proteins linked to cognitive decline. People who protect their sleep aren't just resting. Biologically, they're taking out the trash every single night, while the rest of us let it pile up in the corner. Now, here's the part that explains so much. Sleep lovers tend to spend more time in what's called slow-wave sleep, the deepest, most restorative stage. And slow-wave sleep isn't just physical recovery. It's when your hippocampus takes the chaos of the day, every conversation, every problem, every emotional spike, and quietly files it into long-term memory. Cognitive psychologists describe this as memory consolidation, and it's a big reason why people who sleep well report clearer thinking and better emotional regulation. They're not groggy and slow the next day. They processed everything already. While you were still doom scrolling at 1 a.m., they finished the download. But let's talk about the stereotype because it's a real one. Somewhere, someone decided that loving sleep means you're avoiding life. That if you'd rather be under a blanket than out at a party, something's wrong with you. And look, sometimes that's true. Sometimes sleep becomes an escape hatch, a way to avoid a life that feels overwhelming. Psychologists call that hypersomnia linked to avoidance. And it's worth being honest with yourself about the difference. So here's the real question. Do you love sleep, or are you hiding in it? If your answer involves words like recharge, clarity, reset, you're in a healthy relationship with rest. If your answer involves words like numb, escape, easier than facing today, that's worth a real conversation with someone you trust. Not because you're broken, but because sleep should be a return to yourself, not a retreat from your life. But let's get back to the people who've actually figured this out. Because there's a fascinating paradox here. The people who protect their sleep most fiercely are often the most disciplined people you know. Think about that for a second. It takes real discipline to leave the party at 10, to put the phone down, to say no to just one more episode. Sleep lovers aren't undisciplined. They're disciplined about the one thing almost nobody else is willing to be disciplined about, and that discipline pays off in ways that show up everywhere else. Research published in the Journal of Sleep Research found that consistent, adequate sleepers scored significantly higher on measures of emotional regulation than chronic undersleepers, meaning they're less reactive, less snappy, less likely to spiral over small setbacks. Not because they're naturally calmer people, because their prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for impulse control and rational thinking, is actually online and functioning. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it temporarily shuts down the exact part of your brain you need to make good decisions. Sleep lovers simply never let that part go dark in the first place. Here's something that'll change how you see history too. We act like needing 8 hours in one block is the natural human default. But it's not. For most of human history, sleep was flexible. Some historians point to evidence of first sleep and second sleep, two separate blocks of rest with a waking period in between used for reflection, conversation, even prayer, before artificial light rewired our nights into one long block. The Industrial Revolution is really what killed rest as a cultural value. Factories needed workers awake and alert on a schedule. So sleep got reframed as laziness, as time stolen from productivity. People who protect their sleep today aren't rejecting some ancient human norm. They're quietly pushing back against a 200-year-old factory schedule that was never designed with human biology in mind to begin with. And other cultures never fully bought into that shift. In Spain, the siesta wasn't laziness. It was structured recovery built into the actual workday. In Japan, there's inamuri, the practice of sleeping in public, at your desk, on the train, and instead of being embarrassing, it's read as a sign that you've been working hard enough to need it. Meanwhile, in a lot of Western workplaces, admitting you took a nap still feels like admitting defeat. Different cultures, completely different relationships with the same biological need. Let's talk about the identity piece, because this is where it gets personal. We've built this entire cultural narrative that busyness equals importance. If your calendar isn't packed, if you're not running on fumes, are you even trying? People who love sleep have quietly opted out of that whole game. They're not measuring their worth by how depleted they can get. And that confuses people, because we're so used to associating hustle with value that rest starts to look suspicious, like you must not have enough going on if you have time to sleep well. But here's the truth researchers keep circling back to. The people who sleep well aren't doing less. They're doing the same amount, sometimes more, with a fully charged brain instead of a half-dead one. A well-rested brain solves problems faster, remembers details more accurately, and regulates stress hormones like cortisol far more efficiently than a sleep-deprived one. So while it might look like they're opting out of the grind, what they've actually done is figure out the one input that makes everything else work better. There's a deeper piece here too. Sleep is one of the only times in modern life where you're not producing anything, not performing for anyone, not being watched or judged. For some people, that surrender feels uncomfortable. For sleep lovers, it feels like relief. Psychologist Donald Winnicott talked about the capacity to be alone as a marker of psychological health, the ability to simply exist without needing to prove anything. Sleep might be the purest version of that. No audience, no output. Just you, restoring yourself on your own terms. So what does this mean for you? If you're someone who genuinely loves your bed, who protects your bedtime like it's sacred, who would rather sleep well than stay out late, here's your permission slip. You're not lazy. You're not boring. Your brain has simply refused to buy into a story that treats exhaustion as an achievement. You found restoration in the one place our culture keeps telling us to feel guilty about. The world is loud, overstimulated, and running on empty. And there's something quietly radical about the person who closes their eyes at a reasonable hour and says, "I'll deal with tomorrow when I'm actually capable of dealing with it." That's not weakness. That's the most functional thing a person can do. The next time someone teases you for going to bed early, you can tell them about the glymphatic system, about slow wave sleep, about a prefrontal cortex that actually works because you let it rest. Or you can just smile and say, "Because I like waking up as myself." That usually ends the conversation pretty quickly. If this explains something about yourself you never had the words for, then subscribe to Psychology of You. We promise the next video will be deeper.